Wes Craven, an established name in horror as both writer and director, a man who has created masterpieces such as A Nightmare on Elm Street, New Nightmare, and The People Under the Stairs, who directed the first 4 Scream films, and so many other fantastic entries in the horror genre. The man was an incredible source of scares and created brand new fears for fans to love. His work can be described with so many positive superlatives, and none of it would be exaggerated in most cases. He was, and still is, one of the most influential masters of horror. So what happened when he wrote and directed My Soul to Take? How can such a master release a film like this? A film that feels like a bad facsimile of his previous work. What exactly happened with My Soul to Take? Well, the answer to these questions is one that has many layers and is a bit complicated. Starting from a film that probably would have worked better in the 90s and going all the way to a bungled release, this film had everything working against it. From the start, fans were curious and excited about this new Wes Craven title. Articles in magazines and specialized websites were reporting on its prep and shooting, leading fans of Craven to really look forward to this new film that he both wrote and directed. Something that hadn't happened since New Nightmare, and that was a great showing of his capacities and influence on the genre.
And it felt like I needed to get back to kind of my roots of creativity, and a lot of the pictures I'm best known for, I wrote myself, and just felt good to be, doing the whole thing instead of just doing the directing.
It can also be said that this way of making a horror film, extremely meta in all aspects, opened up new doors in the genre and directly led to Scream, which Craven directed but did not write.
Look behind. Look behind you.
My Soul to Take was getting plenty of press and attention before it was even finished, so it would make sense that it would get a massive opening weekend, but it didn't. My Soul to Take opened on October 8, 2010, to a flopping number of $6.8 million at the North American box office, putting it in 5th place for that weekend's numbers, under The Social Network, Life as We Know It, Secretariat, and Legend of the Guardians. So, a variety of films in different genres basically beat an October-released horror film. How is that logical? How is that possible? Must just be because it was not close enough to Halloween. Well, not quite. The film, in its second weekend, fell to number 8, then to number 12, then on Halloween weekend, it fell to number 24 at the box office. Of course, one could blame the other releases, and could be right. That Halloween season, both Paranormal Activity 2 and Saw the Final Chapter were unleashed unto fans and made bank. That being said, My Soul to Take came out before the 2 of these and had a few weeks to make its money, which it simply did not. Overall, the film made $21.5 million US worldwide when it cost about $25 million US to make. This is what makes a flop, but in this case, at a minor loss. Why did Craven fans and horror fans not show up for My Soul to Take? What happened? Well, the film was made, and there was plenty of hope for it. Then the studio had test screenings, and those were unsuccessful. It was so bad, in fact, that the version shown will possibly never be seen. Now let's be honest, test screenings are not always a good indicator of what a specific group of people will like. This may sound weird, so let's explain. Most test screenings for studios are done in the Los Angeles area, places like Santa Monica or Culver City. They pick a random group of people to go watch the film. These people are of various ages, backgrounds, and cultures. However, the thing they all have in common is that they are able to attend a screening that is oftentimes in the middle of the day on a weekday. So that cuts out most of students, working people, and those with a life, really. It leads to having people who attend a bunch of these screenings, but not necessarily the right people for the film at hand. What are the chances that those test screenings got a full room of horror fans on a, say, Tuesday afternoon? Pretty thin. So the film was screened to most likely non-horror fans in high percentages of its audience, possibly even people who have no idea of the genre, how it works, and what could possibly scare the target audience on opening weekend. Now, take those people whose fault it is absolutely not, show them a horror film, and let them be the judge of whether it is good or not. In the case of My Soul to Take, they hated it. They particularly hated the ending. This led to the studio thinking it was bad and sending it back for rewrites and reshoots. This means that a random group of strangers disliked or hated the film's last third, possibly second half, so much so the studio thought it needed to be redone. This is something that happens more often than the general public thinks. Take G.I. Joe Retaliation. The film tested so badly, they rewrote and reshot the whole thing, effectively removing Channing Tatum from the film almost entirely. Was it correct in that case? Well, just like with My Soul to Take, it's hard to tell without having seen the first version of the film. Now, the studio had a new version of the film with a new ending, and well, they also wanted to maximize their return on investment. So they decided to go with the all-popular option of making this a 3D film in post. It had worked for the My Bloody Valentine remake the year before, so of course it should be great with this film as well. Except it wasn't. My Bloody Valentine had a setup that led itself to being made in 3D, with kills that splatter plenty and tunnels in the mines that were perfect for that 3D added creep factor. My Soul to Take, on the other hand, was just not made for 3D, and adding it made no real sense for the story or for the audience. It came off as a ploy to be able to charge more per ticket in theaters, and honestly, it probably was. From there, the film got the traditional trailer it released, ads in mags and online, more or less the same treatment as any horror film. However, it was going through these motions, along with the aforementioned Paranormal Activity 2, which was coming off the humongous success of the first one, and the new Saw film, which at the time gained from the yearly release of a Saw film, making October known as the month of Saw, or the season of Saw. If it's Halloween, it must be Saw. That, in and of itself, was a beast to fight at the box office. Horror fans were all over the Saw franchise, and the Paranormal Activity films, so perhaps having My Soul to Take come out on the same month was a mistake. Helping this theory along is the fact that the film was originally slated to come out much closer to those two, and the studio saw it wise to release it earlier to try and get to the horror fans before the other films were unleashed and became monster-sized hits. Another issue here may have been the cast. Most horror films of this type have at least one very recognizable lead in there, and while a lot of the cast for My Soul to Take is now either really well known or at the very least quite familiar to most audiences, let's be honest and admit that back in 2010, most of them were not exactly box office draws. Release a film with Frank Grillo as the lead cop on the job these days, and you'll at the very least get a few action film fans showing up. Some Marvel fans, and then others who have come to know him and love him from his career so far back. Back 12 years ago, he was known from television work and the occasional film, but not quite like now. Playing another secondary character as Danai Gurira, who is better known for Black Panther now, but back in 2010, she was not exactly known, and people were not flocking to see her work yet. In the lead, the film cast adorable-faced Max Thieriot, who had made a handful of films by that point, but was not yet known as a leading man. He was a gamble, and possibly one that didn't work out. Use him in a similar part now, and horror fans and others would know who he is, but back then, not so much. The rest of the cast were not well known at the time. Some look familiar, but most viewers did not have a clue who they were back when My Soul to Take came out. This could have been a great advantage had the film been more like a found footage film. But here, a more known cast would have really helped sell tickets. The film here clearly relied on the performances from the cast and the fact that horror fans would flock to see a new Wes Craven written and directed film. However, that was quite the mistake, and with fairly weak marketing and trailers, the film was not exactly calling to horror fans in any sort of way. Add to that the fact that it had done poorly at test screenings, that it had to be reshot, it left fans wondering if they should just wait for home video. Another aspect that may have helped horror fans stay away was that a lot of their favorites had been releasing duds over the last few years, and newer series and artists were releasing much more exciting work. The world was more into a torture and haunting place, of which My Soul to Take was neither. A few films were making it outside of those subgenres, but fans were moving away from Teens at Risk and from the traditional supernatural slashers. The subgenre felt overdone already. Was Wes Craven going to be able to revive a subgenre again like he had done with Scream? Well, fans didn't seem to think so, and they generally skipped the film with the unappealing trailers, the patchy history, and the studio that clearly didn't believe in it. The main trailer released, which is available online easily now, was incredibly generic and seemingly revealed the killer right out the gate in the first few frames of its footage. The film's entire setup is right there for all to see, and editing it in a very 1992 way.
My name is Adam Hellerman, but everyone calls me Bug.
This trailer was shown fairly wide, and it just showed what seemed like the entire film. There is not much in terms of surprise as anyone would expect after watching the trailer. Why did the studio show that trailer? Well, most likely to attract horror fans by showing them the best bits. But in the end, it clearly was not what was needed. Would a trailer saying from Wes Craven, master of horror, master of your nightmares, comes a new breed of slasher, a film which anyone could be the killer, be too generic? Well, probably, and it would have made it sound a lot like Scream. One thing is for certain, the trailer My Soul to Take got did not cut it, and perhaps a more creative way of selling the film could have really helped it. Now let's look at how the film was received by critics. Oh wait, it was not at the time, as the studio did something else that shows absolutely no faith in a film and did not screen it for reviewers or the press. It kept the film a mystery from everyone in an effort to protect it from bad reviews. Here's the thing, some horror fans will purposely go see films they have heard are terrible. It's just something we do. It's a thing that has been done for decades. So, while bad reviews may have kept the general public away, they also may help someone want to see a film. Here, there were no reviews before the film was released, and it helped minimize the negative press, but it also helped minimize the attention the film got. At this point in time, there are plenty of reviews of the film out there, and they vary from bland to pure hate, with the general consensus being that the film is generic, formulaic, and not exactly fun to watch. And they are basically right. This is a movie that should have been a blast to watch or completely scary. It's from Wes Craven, who could easily do both in the same film, and do so while rewriting the rules of the genre. This man was a genius of horror, and My Soul to Take is probably his weakest in his career and one that suffered greatly from studio involvement with its rewrites, reshoots, and the 3D being slapped on there at the last minute in a ploy to make more money. This movie should have been left alone in its original version, as there is almost no way it was worse than what was delivered to the public. At the very least, it would have been a more Wes Craven film, and fans would have been better able to get his true vision here. Of course, as it is, the film is a bit of a bore now, with some really good ideas thrown in there throughout. In terms of a horror film, it's bland. It's not that interesting, but it does have a cast that some will now want to check out in some of their more earlier work. My Soul to Take is a film that proves that too much studio meddling can kill a movie and make it something that is truly bland, made for and marketed to the masses when it should have been a more niche product from a master. It should have been sold itself, but too many hands and too many opinions made it something that just did not work for its intended public, but they tried to make it for a much larger public, who also ended up not being interested.
In case you haven't seen it yourself, Shocker follows Horus Pinker, a TV repairman by day and murderous psychopath by night. His rampage escalates when he targets the home of Lieutenant Parker, the lead investigator on his case, ruthlessly claiming the lives of Parker's wife and 2 of his foster children. Meanwhile, Jonathan, Parker's remaining son, experiences inexplicable connections to Pinker through his dreams. Utilizing these eerie visions, Jonathan guides his father and a team of officers to Pinker's place of business. During a violent shootout resulting in the loss of multiple officers, Pinker manages to evade capture and seeks vengeance by targeting Jonathan's girlfriend, Allison. Exploiting the opportunity while Jonathan is engaged in practice, Pinker mercilessly takes Allison's life, cruelly deeming it a birthday present. Driven by his link to Pinker, Jonathan and his father pursue the killer to a residential location, apprehending Pinker in the midst of another heinous act. Following a confrontation and arrest, Pinker faces execution in the electric chair. Having made a pact with the devil for supernatural abilities, Pinker returns from death by becoming pure energy, possessing unsuspecting individuals to continue his reign of terror. Only through Jonathan's strategic planning does a solution emerge. And that, my friends, is when this film really goes bonkers. After A Nightmare on Elm Street, Craven wanted to distance himself from the series, apart from Dream Warriors. He didn't care for his creation's direction and made the Dream Warriors as a way to finish the series. But alas, that was not the case. And the idea for Shocker was birthed as a response. The idea caught the attention of Alive Films, the team behind They Live, amongst several others, and the movie was released just months after A Nightmare on Elm Street 5. The intent was to create a franchise to out-Freddy Freddy, while having full control over the series. Unfortunately, the film's failure squashed all plans for future sequels. But why was it such a misfire? Perhaps looking at it from a more mature point of view, the film is tonally all over the place. The first half plays it pretty seriously with Pinker's brutal killings, but once he gets electrocuted at the halfway mark, that's when the film gets pretty damn silly.
You got it, baby.
Pinker throws out one-liners like he's Freddy in the sequels, possesses an armchair, and even has a chase through TV land. And yes, there are even dream sequences. Craven just seemed unable to escape that motif. Shit, he even has some of them in Deadly Friend. So maybe audiences were simply getting tired of the same old. But as a kid in the 90s, this movie rocked. I didn't care if it took a violent Looney Tunes route. It was fun and had a kick-ass soundtrack. Plus, I was a kid. I'm sure one thing that most people would agree on, though, is that the soundtrack rocks. The producer from Alive Films came from a hard rock background, working with folks like Meat Loaf and Alice Cooper, which is probably why Cooper was in the Alive-produced Prince of Darkness. So, of course, the soundtrack would consist of rock and metal. First, you have Megadeth covering Alice Cooper's No More Mr. Nice Guy. And you also have quite possibly the most excellent theme song ever by supergroup The Dudes of Wrath. That band consisted of members of Whitesnake, Motley Crue, and Kiss. Since my older siblings babysat me quite a bit, 80s hair metal was my jam. This was something that my friends would make fun of me for by the time I reached high school in the 90s, but that did not matter to me. The theme song is like an earworm. If you listen to it once, you'll catch yourself randomly singing the word shocker in a bad Paul Stanley voice. As for Horace Pinker, Mitch Pileggi owns this role. In contrast to the things that didn't completely work, Pileggi's performance is what the film got right. He's menacing and not merely a one-dimensional villain, but a complex and multifaceted antagonist. He's played with chilling intensity, and yeah, he's kinda funny. Had Craven gotten his way and more sequels followed, it would be damn near difficult to think of someone else playing the character, just like Robert Englund with Freddy. Really, the whole cast is great. You have Peter Berg as Jonathan, Ted Raimi, and Michael Murphy. Oh, and John Tesh is there too. As things go with box office bombs, Shocker found some life on physical media over the years. Thank God for companies like Scream Factory to give our films the treatment they deserve and reintroduce forgotten gems to the public. In fact, I hear about it more today than I did when I was younger. It's talked about quite a bit on SiriusXM's Liquid Metal, which always makes me smile. Even though I personally think the movie is great, that doesn't mean it's not flawed. If there was anything in Craven's filmography that deserves a remake, it would be Shocker. None of this Elm Street remake nonsense. I remember a few years later, I was watching the movie Fallen with Denzel Washington and getting pissed that it was just a clear ripoff of Shocker. Even the guy who gets electrocuted and eventually possesses others looks strikingly like Pinker. Maybe it was unintentional and Shocker was unconsciously cemented into the filmmaker's brains. That's the kind of influence that Wes Craven had. Regardless, I was mad. I'm not going to say his vision was perfect. As an adult who has never seen it, you may even say it's far from great. But for me, I can see past the flaws and feel that same nostalgia that I felt as a child. That's the beauty of the films that I talked about in this series. Every one of them is like a time machine that instantly transports us to a single memory when we first watched it. And for 90 minutes or so, you're a kid again, sitting in your living room watching a movie with the people who are no longer with us. And now, as the circle of life does its thing, a set of new memories in any shape or form can be created to enjoy for years to come. And for that, I want to say thank you to the man responsible for my love of the genre and for making me feel young again.
Don't let them bury me. I'm not dead.
When we think of zombies, it's only natural to go first right into everyone's favorite flesh-eating ghouls that were popularized by George Romero in his genre classic Night of the Living Dead. But the idea of zombies has been around much longer and is actually steeped in fact. Haitian voodoo has claimed to create zombies for hundreds of years, and in film, these were represented in some of our earliest horror movies. White Zombie and I Walked with a Zombie are two of the more famous ones, but the entire subgenre has some fascinating watches. Horror legend Wes Craven brought a return to voodoo zombies in 1988's The Serpent and the Rainbow, but did you know this story is based on true events? Don't let them bury you as we find out what the fuck really happened to this horror movie. In 1985, a book called The Serpent and the Rainbow, a Harvard scientist's astonishing journey into the secret societies of Haitian voodoo, zombies, and magic, that's a mouthful, was published by Simon & Schuster based on the journey of anthropologist Wade Davis. The book was popular, but also criticized for inaccuracies. What could have been a purely scientific study was turned into a non-fiction narrative almost. The book leans heavily on not only the journey that Davis went through, but also the very history of voodoo zombies in the country he visits. 3 years later, the film adaptation would come out with The Serpent and the Rainbow that was released on February 5th, and would make $19 million on its $7 million budget. The movie was directed by horror legend Wes Craven. After watching this for the first time in about 20 years, I'd forgotten how different it is compared to his other horror movies. It's not music of the heart levels of non-horror, but it's much more of an investigative political thriller with some awesomely scary scenes thrown in. The movie is, of course, based on the book by Davis, but the screenplay was written by Richard Maxwell and Adam Rodman. Maxwell only had 2 other movies to his name, with The Challenge, starring Scott Glenn and Toshiro Mifune, from 1982, and Shadow of a Ninja from 1989. Rodman has even less under his belt, with only a handful of TV movies and episodes before and after this. They both did a great job with the material, even if they made it a much more exciting and supernatural adventure. The movie's directed by Wes Craven, who's almost certainly best known for the TV movies Chiller from 1985 and Night Visions from 1990. Yep, nothing else to look at. Look, I get bored talking about the same A+ movies from these guys, okay? Oh, also check out Invitation to Hell. The cast is also a fun and eclectic group led by everyone's favorite president, Bill Pullman. Pullman plays the stand-in for Davis named Dennis Allen. It feels like Pullman has been around forever, but that's just due to his roles being iconic. He actually had his first on-screen appearance in the TV show Cagney and Lacey before quickly becoming Lone Star in Spaceballs. In addition to being a war hero president in Independence Day, he showed up in other horror fare like Braindead and Lake Placid. The supporting cast features Kathy Tyson as the Doctor Contact, Academy Award nominee Paul Winfield as the nice voodoo priest, and Zakes Moak as the evil doctor and political enforcer. Really hope I got that name right. The movie opens with the ever-popular "This movie was inspired by a true story" text, as well as a cool and chilling little preamble. In the legends of voodoo, the serpent is the symbol of the earth. The rainbow is the symbol of heaven. Between the two, all creatures must live and die. But because he has a soul, man can be trapped in a terrible place where death is only the beginning. We then see a body being stolen by a group of armed men straight out of a funeral, followed by another man being pronounced dead and buried before tears roll down his face. We then get introduced to Bill Pullman's character of Alan Dennis, who has landed in the Amazon and speaks with a shaman before drinking a potion and getting lost in the forest. His pilot has died, but the jaguar spirit he became friends with leads him to safety. Alan Dennis is the stand-in for the real-life Wade Davis, and moving past the first scene for a moment, Davis really was lost in the jungles of Colombia. But he wasn't alone after his pilot friend was killed, nor did he meet a shaman priest that gave him a hallucinogen and had him play with a jaguar. Out of his group of fellow travelers, he was the only one who saw it and claims it led him the right way to civilization, just like the one in the movie. The first part is a table setter to multiple cases of zombieism that Davis alludes to in many of the historical chapters of his book to better paint the picture of his real-life journey. Sometime after Dennis makes it home, he's called in to speak to a member of a pharmaceutical company and a professor to see if he will go to Haiti to investigate a possible drug that makes zombies. They want to use its possible effects for anesthetic purposes and show him the case of Christophe, who was a man that apparently died and was buried before coming back 7 years later. He agrees to go with funding and a reward to research both the man and the medicine. When he gets there, he meets Dr. Duchamp, who is in charge of the patients and has a very real experience in possession and voodoo. The two go to a local nightclub owner and kind priest Lucien Celine, who is willing to help them but warns of the local police who are led by an evil man. Alan and Dr. Duchamp find Christophe in a graveyard and talk to him about his death. This section's really close to what actually happened. Wade Davis was approached by a pharmaceutical company to go investigate the theoretical drug that could help patients and doctors with surgeries and other procedures. The tale of Christophe is actually based on the real case of Claverius Narcisse, who was pronounced dead in 1962, but 18 years later found by his sister and told her he was brought back to work as a slave. The movie changes more names as well as a few of the important aspects of the characters Alan meets. Instead of the tough eventual love interest of Dr. Duchamp, the real doctor was Lamar Duyan. Max Bouvier was turned into Lucien, and his daughter Rachel becomes a companion to Wade, though there was no romance between them, merely respect for each other's curiosity about what's going on. The two did also speak to Narcisse, who is what Christophe was based off of. The movie moves on to Alan coming back to his hotel, only to find it ransacked and bloody with an assailant still inside. He and Marielle Duchamp go see the man who can allegedly make the zombie powder named Mozart. Mozart has a whole party atmosphere with cockfighting, a bar, and plenty of people to enjoy. He presents a goat that he will give the powder to, and Alan secretly marks its hoof with a knife to track it before watching it die. They leave and go to a ceremony where Dennis has an awful dream with Christoph and an unknown zombie who shoots a snake out of its mouth in one of the movie's best scares. Dennis and Muriel make love, and on the way home, Dennis is taken in by the police who warn him to stop his investigation. Lots of screaming in the background suggest a warning, and some really good political dialogue too. Well, there's quite a bit of divergence here, mostly to create a movie plot. Instead of the villainous Petrade, the real version of this was far less nefarious, Lamarck Douillon. He was mostly another scientist who was attempting to find the proper use for the formula, and is the one who found the case of Narcisse. He also warned Davis that it was attempted murder in Haiti to use the potion on a person. Mozart was based off another man named Marcel Pierre, who would actually get famous from the BBC for explaining the zombie potion, something the movie calls back to later on. Rachel was just 16 when Davis met her, and as I said earlier, there was no romance between the two. She was the daughter of Max Bouvier, but she did have a history of ritual possession. Muriel and Dennis go back to Mozart the next day, and he tries to sell them on a different goat from the one they saw die. Alan tricks Mozart while also calling him a fool, and seems to drink the zombie poison, but by sleight of hand has switched it to something completely harmless. Mozart, impressed, agrees to give him the real ingredients, but says Dennis must help him with the entire process. The police take Dennis again, but this time there is no warning, and they drive a nail into his scrotum. Muriel takes him to nurse back to health, and they stay in the jungle while continuing to make the powder. The police now frame him for murder and force him to leave rather than go to prison. Mozart meets him on the plane and gives him the powder in exchange for fame, and his watch. In a cool case of art imitating life, Wade Davis pulled similar trickery in a badass move to impress Pierre, who also tried to give Davis fake powder. He agreed to show him the real stuff, but, just like the movie shows, wanted Davis to help. Many of the ingredients in the film were also the real ones used in the actual powder, especially tetrodotoxin, another one I hope I said right, which is one of the most powerful on the planet. Instead of an old woman's skull, the real-life recipe called for the skull of a recently deceased infant. Yikes. On the other side of the truth coin, since Davis was never assaulted or taken by police, the infamous nail through the scrotum scene was complete fiction, as was Alan being framed for murder. Things I'm sure Wade Davis is quite happy about. Back home, Dennis looks over all the ingredients and they run tests on animals while also figuring out possible applications for the drug. Dennis continues to have nightmares and be plagued by what he left behind, and at a dinner to celebrate, the wife of the pharmaceutical rep is possessed and attempts to hurt the people at the party. Dennis flies back to Haiti and must evade capture while Mozart is killed and Muriel is taken to be sacrificed. Lucien tries to protect Alan but is killed while Alan is sprayed with the powder. He's pronounced dead and buried alive, only to be rescued by Christoph. Slowly recovering, he goes to save Muriel while the country's leader flees with a revolution beginning. Alan uses that chaos to sneak in and get past a zombified Lucien and other spirits to confront Petrade. He and Muriel destroy all the soul canisters, which weakens their enemy, before he and Alan have one final face-off in his mind, something Lucien warned him about. Wade left Haiti under far less harrowing circumstances, but he did head back home to Harvard to study the concoction. He also traveled back to the country, but again, not because of cross-global possession or because his love interest was in danger. Obviously, everything with Petrade was fabricated, as the man wasn't real either. When he returned to Haiti, a man named Gerard Simon was the one to help he and Rachel make the most complete jar of zombie potion and to understand it better. A good chunk of the book is actually a great history lesson on the region and the beginnings of zombie culture. The movie tells a fun story based on the adventures of Wade Davis, but obviously goes much further into an exciting and even more supernatural feel. The book is easy and a great read, even if Davis faced criticism from the scientific community. Fact doesn't quite match fiction here, but there are a lot of things that were taken close to verbatim. Watch the Shudder episode of Cursed Films Season 2 on the making of the movie, rewatch the film on Scream Factory's amazing Blu-ray, and then discover for yourself how much of it was real by checking out the book.
It isn't you. He's scarier.
Darker. More evil. Ever played in the cat?
However, it happens when the story dies, and the evil is set free. 1, 2, Freddy's coming for you.
Don't miss me.
When one of your horror-headed friends mentions Wes Craven slasher flicks that lean into the late director's signature meta-filmmaking style, what movie automatically comes to mind?
What's your favorite scary movie?
I don't know.
Well, yeah, but let's not forget that Scream, while being arguably the greatest and most consistent slasher franchise of all time, it's not Craven's first turn at using meta-commentary to create an iconic horror film. The director is remembered fondly for reinvigorating the slasher genre with 1996's Scream, and rightfully so. But before reinvigorating the genre, he first invigorated it with the iconic Nightmare on Elm Street franchise, which introduced audiences to one of the most recognizable movie villains of all time.
This is God.
And while we at JoBlo Horror are forever fans of the iconic series of films starring this dream-stalking maniac, today we're going to single out one of the franchise's most well-received installments, and, barring the less than stellar 2009 reboot, the final film in this beloved series. For now. Wes Craven's 1994 masterpiece titled New Nightmare was a timeless blend of fourth-wall shattering narrative and a truly nightmarish story that proves that even the filmmakers behind these scares are not immune to the true horror of their own creation. And in today's episode, we're gonna slice open this cult classic movie and figure out just what makes it so important to the genre that we all know and love.
Does that change your feeling, your perspective about horror movies?
I'm Keir Gomes with JoBlo Horror, and you're watching Deconstructing.
Can you make believe?
Wes Craven's New Nightmare follows iconic Final Girl actress Heather Langenkamp as a loosely dramatized version of herself as she attempts to put the role of Nancy from the Nightmare on Elm Street films behind her. Right off the bat, I need to mention that this movie works best if you've seen the previous installments, or at the very least, the original film. The gimmick of the story is that it's set in a world where the Nightmare on Elm Street movies are just that, movies.
With the guy with the... Yeah, sure.
Instead of Heather Langenkamp playing Nancy, she plays herself, a successful actress in Hollywood who's looking for her next big project. Even her real-life husband, David Leroy Anderson, plays himself in this movie. But when Nancy starts seeing Freddy in her nightmares after talks of a new Freddy film begin circulating, she slowly realizes that leaving this franchise is going to be much harder than she thought, as director Wes Craven, played by himself, is developing a script that is more real than anyone could have expected.
He's decided to cross over out of films into our reality.
As always, we'll be deconstructing this movie by way of our 4 key categories: origin, legacy, trivia, and finally, the X Factor, where we look for a unique aspect of this film that deserves more praise. So, if you're ready, then keep your backs to the wall, and whatever you do, don't answer the phone.
Hello?
1, 2.
And let's hit play on New Nightmare. Now, it's not exactly a secret that the Nightmare on Elm Street franchise began with the iconic slasher style of the first film, and slowly began getting more and more cartoonish and outlandish over the following films. No shade to Craven, I mean, I happen to enjoy most of the movies in this franchise, even if he doesn't. But Craven set out to deliver audiences something more psychological with this installment. His idea and original vision for Freddy and his reign of terror had been carried in an unexpected direction in movies like Dream Child, which explored many of the more comedic isms of Freddy Krueger. But the plan for New Nightmare was to return to a darker and more evil Freddy.
Darker. More evil?
Yeah.
According to Craven, the idea for New Nightmare, which was originally titled Nightmare on Elm Street: The Ascension, was conceived during his time working on Dream Warriors, but New Line rejected the idea at the time, causing Craven to sit on it. The design of Freddy underwent just as many changes as the writing of the character as well, with Freddy being given a modified look that was more sleek and much darker. Literally, they have Freddy in a dark trench coat and a glove that looks like it's fused to his arm.
State-of-the-art animatronics enhanced with bioorganic grafting, full tendons, nerve bundles from a live Doberman.
Personally, I love the look of our villain in this movie. Aside from Freddy's freaky new image, there were quite a few wardrobe pieces and costumes that were reused in this movie that were saved by Craven from the original film in 1984. I also heard that this story weaves in some truth, with Heather Langenkamp having dealt with a stalker in real life, which Craven carefully wrote into the script in the form of Freddy, which really adds an eerie realism to Langenkamp's performance and paranoia in this movie.
Hello.
Excuse me, ma'am, but we are going to be late.
Okay.
Producer Sarah Reicher worked closely with Craven on the production of the film, and according to her, the shoot was a blast and quite smooth. She quotes, "All of the directors had to be guided through, but Wes, by then, was the master." New Line being reluctant about making the film in the late 80s was a short-lived setback, as once the 10th anniversary of the original film started approaching, New Line decided that the best way to celebrate the beloved long-running franchise was to have Wes Craven come back to the helm and make his meta masterpiece. The movie was then given a budget of $8 million and cameras started rolling in 1993, 30 years ago. Wow, we are getting old, guys. I think it's safe to say that this movie is the definitive final installment of the Nightmare franchise. As such, this movie is remembered as a solid final chapter to this series that perfectly suits Wes Craven's self-aware sensibilities.
Trying to say this doesn't feel normal, it feels too real.
The scene of Freddy attacking Dylan and Judy in the hospital is probably one of the most iconic scenes, and for good reason. This is one of the few Elm Street films that genuinely frightened me as a young horror hound.
Just because it's a love story doesn't mean you can't have a decapitation or two.
I find that seeing England play himself, who is mostly gentle and artistic and an empathetic person, contrasts extremely well against the new and much more mean Freddy. Finding a subtle balance between the mystical and practical was also something that helped set this film apart. Using Hollywood as the setting and even bringing in plot elements like the recurring earthquakes, which add uncertainty to Heather's increasingly paranoid behavior.
Is there anything other than the obvious bothering you?
I think 5 earthquakes in 3 weeks is enough, sweetie.
Not to mention the absolutely horrifying kills that Freddy commits, which seemed much more personal than we were used to. This movie genuinely feels like a final showdown between Heather/Nancy and Freddy, and it never lets up once it gets going. There's plenty of blood, creative set pieces, and disturbing Freddy Krueger supernaturalness, but this time it never feels silly. Dylan was a worthy performance as well. Heather's son, who is being stalked and haunted by Freddy throughout the film, and the scene of Dylan in the park is sure to make any parent's skin crawl. You know which scene I'm talking about. But of course, we need to cover the infamy as well as the praise. And I'm sorry to say that despite being in my top 3 Nightmare on Elm Street films, this movie had the lowest performing box office reception of any of the other films in the franchise, with a very skim $19.8 million. I mean, the movie was competing with Quentin Tarantino's pop culture phenomenon Pulp Fiction in the fall of 1994, and many of the filmmakers involved with the project suspect that that is the reason for the poor performance, and that's probably it. Check this out. In 1993, when this movie was filming, Wes Craven stated that he wanted to give a call to none other than Johnny Depp, who made his debut in the first film. Craven wanted him to appear in the movie as himself, to keep up the theme of meta-ness and having actors from the movies play themselves in a movie. But in the mid-90s, Johnny Depp was on the come-up as a Hollywood hotshot, and Craven says he was too embarrassed to ask. But interestingly, Depp later told Craven that he would have been delighted to work on the movie and would have done so if Craven asked him. Talk about a missed opportunity there.
You see his face?
You see his face?
Glenn, not now.
And did you know that at the end of the movie, there's a special dedication made to Greg Fonseca, who was the production designer of the original film and helped build the incredible world of Elm Street. But that's not all. Fonseca also received a dedication in the brilliant 1995 comedy Tommy Boy. And I cannot think of two more different movies to have dedicated to you, and I love it.
Oh, my pretty little pet. I love you.
And before we move on, let's see if you can answer this question. Which Nightmare on Elm Street movie is on record as Robert Englund's favorite in the series? Is it A, A Nightmare on Elm Street, B, Dream Warriors, or C, New Nightmare? Comment your answers down below. Okay everybody, here we are, and for fans of this show, you probably know that I had a difficult time coming up with the right topic for this category. A part of me wanted to make this all about the real-world influences that the writing of this movie uses to craft the narrative. For example, Craven and Englund once appeared on a talk show in San Francisco to talk about whether or not the Elm Street franchise was suitable for kids. That interview inspired Craven to directly recreate it in the film, which only adds to the blurred line between being a movie and kind of being a documentary. And while being absolutely brilliant, it was also very intentional and receives high praise from just about everybody. And also a true case of life imitating art is the LA earthquakes, as the film was shot only months before the actual catastrophic earthquakes in 1994. I like to think that similar to how Craven's writing came to life in New Nightmare, the writing of the actual script came to life as well. It's meta on so many levels that it could almost confuse you, right?
Well, dramatically speaking, it makes perfect sense. You played Nancy after all.
And you know what? Maybe I've been overthinking the X factor of this movie. While I usually pride myself on finding small details that make a big impact on the film, I think the true genius of this movie is much simpler. I could sit here all day and point out all the ways that Craven outdid himself. But the reality is that the X factor of this movie has been crystal clear from the very opening scene. It's the fourth wall.
It's only make-believe?
Honestly, let's think about it. Breaking the fourth wall is practically commonplace in movies today, whether it's Deadpool being aware that he's in a movie, or even Ferris Bueller speaking directly to the camera in John Hughes' iconic ode to playing hooky. This movie takes what was previously a wild and complex franchise and completely exposes it while simultaneously expanding on it. It's like a fourth wall inside of a fourth wall. It's like an eighth wall, or like a 16th wall. Either way, it's too brilliant and way too much fun to not be the X factor.
Whether or not you're willing to play Nancy one last time.
But as always, I am dying to hear your thoughts on this iconic movie, and if you're a fan of the Elm Street franchise, leave your ranking of the movies down below. I think this is mine. Also, let us know if you would like to see a new Elm Street movie. I think with enough interest and the right idea, we may be able to see Mike Flanagan give us his take on this beloved character. And I personally think it would be a dream come true. Or should I say, a nightmare.